Hello, and welcome to a special live of Useful Idiots. We are really excited to be here with Sina Toossi, who is a senior fellow at the Center for International Policy. We have tons of breaking news to talk about, but before we do that, what do you think is the most important thing for people to know right now about what is happening?
Hey, well, thanks for having me. Right now, I think the most important thing to know is that this is completely an unnecessary war, unjustified war. This is objectively a war of aggression on Israel's part, that Iran was at the negotiating table. Iran had just done 5 rounds of negotiations with Trump. Trump was adamant that he wanted a deal. And all of a sudden now they're kind of surprise attacking Iran. So this was a war, this is a war of choice. This could be potentially catastrophic for American interests, for stability in the Middle East and the world. And it is entirely due to the recklessness and impunity by which the Israeli government has been acting.
Right. We actually have a video that I wanted you to react to. It's of a news story about the bombing of an Israeli hospital, and there's so much to unpack here. It's from NBC, and it's with Richard Engelman, and I think people will be shocked, but not shocked at the same time, to see how this bombing is framed. So let's take a look at this.
Dozens of Iranian ballistic missiles rained down across Israel this morning. Sirens wailed as Israeli air defense systems sprung into action. But at least 4 of Iran's powerful missiles made it through. The Soroka hospital in Beersheba in southern Israel took a direct hit, according to Israeli officials. The impact captured on a cell phone video. Inside, staff and security moved to evacuate patients and search for injured, with sections of the ceiling on the floor. Israel's defense minister called it a war crime, and Prime Minister Netanyahu saying, "We will exact the full price from the tyrants in Tehran." There were no deaths reported, but several injured. Iran said it was aiming for a military site near the hospital. Another missile exploded in Ramat Gan outside Tel Aviv, hitting a business district. And more buildings in nearby Holon. Search and rescue teams arriving quickly.
We have 5 buildings that were hit by the missile. We have one which is the main building and all the other ones surrounding it.
Israel is continuing its strikes across Iran to pick apart the country's military, destroying these Iranian helicopters and missile launchers and nuclear sites. But some nuclear facilities are buried so deeply only American bunker busters can reach them.
Okay, so what are your thoughts on this news, but just as importantly, on the way the media is framing it?
Yeah, it's pretty breathtaking to see, how the American corporate media really manufactures consent to war. This is how it's more blatant. I would argue that American propaganda compared to the propaganda of many other states has actually, been much more sophisticated. Like it really in the legacy media and the mainstream media, once you really dig into and track them for a long time, it's clear that they're not independent from the American national security state. It's like some decision is made, and then a lot of the mainstream outlets, the network news, they just kind of regurgitate the government line, not unlike any authoritarian regime. So it's like we have this illusion of, and I don't want to, there's definitely an element of a free press, and there's good journalists at these outlets, but there's definitely a strong controlled media environment in our mainstream media that manufactures what the national security state was. And in this case, it's this very one-sided narrative about this war that Israel initiated. Israel, a country that has, according to the consensus of genocide scholars, is doing a genocide in Gaza. According to the consensus of human rights activists and experts and organizations, is an apartheid state. So this is not some victim. And Israel has not only, pulverized Gaza and destroyed many hospitals, it's also targeted 2 hospitals in Iran in the past week, which conveniently this report has not mentioned. Now, with that said, I would argue any attack on a hospital is unjustified, it's condemnable, it is a war crime, but, Iran has said that it targeted a military site next to there, similar to what Israel argues with its attacks on hospitals. So this is this impunity that has been created, and I think it's just testament to how our international relations in our world today is going to a very dangerous direction, which is going to be bad for human beings everywhere. But this genie that has been taken out of the bottle, this kind of destruction of norms has been wholly endorsed by America and Europe, who've trampled on their own self-proclaimed values and institutions and the norms that they claim that they've created about human rights and war crimes and the Geneva Conventions. They've trampled all of that, and this is going to end nowhere good for anybody, I would argue.
Yeah, and I mean the talk of it as a war crime is just so stunning when it's coming from officials from the very government that has bombed hospitals on several occasions during the Gaza genocide and has no apparently awareness of the rank hypocrisy, and they're calling that a war crime while they call what they do justified. They say, oh, it's Hamas is in there, oh, they're human shields. I mean, this attack by Iran didn't even kill anyone. Their attacks on hospitals kills countless people.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, this is Israeli government that thinks we're stupid, that thinks that Americans are stupid, and that thinks, our own, unfortunately, large parts of our media and our national security apparatus also apparently think that we're incredibly stupid. That this is very cheap propaganda. Again, it's much more blatant and cheap than it was. I mean, even in the Iraq War, there was after 9/11, there was massive propaganda. I remember leading up to the invasion of Iraq, the public was much more prepared for it and indoctrinated to support it. This is kind of just out of the blue surprise attack. Trump didn't talk about doing, Trump ran as an anti-war candidate. He was pursuing these negotiations with Iran. If anything, all the reporting in the past 6 months has really been that Netanyahu wants to go to war with Iran, and Trump was kind of pushing back. I mean, we can get into, some theories about exactly what was going on there later, but it's kind of out of the blue. All of a sudden, we're on the cusp of this major Middle Eastern war, and we're expected to support it on behalf of this criminal regime that is really trying to take advantage of American power and American lives and have us to go fight for it. And it doesn't make any sense for Americans, for any, I think, reasonable definition of American interest. If American interest is about the prosperity and security and livelihoods of people in our country, none of that is going to be benefited by going to war against Iran in the Middle East, a country that posed no direct threat to America, that its whole military doctrine is fundamentally defensive, as the Pentagon itself has acknowledged. I mean, we can get into the discussion about the nuclear program, but there's no reasonable way you can talk about Iran posing a threat to America. Iran is a very, it's a country that we've debilitated for decades through severe economic strangulation and sanctions and covert actions, and have prepped the grounds for this war. But there's no way that it doesn't have an offensive military posture. So this is a war that is for Israel and its kind of hegemonic, imperialistic ambitions in the Middle East to dominate this region, to rule over the impoverished, destabilized region as kind of fortress Israel that's expansionist, that is trying to, displace the Palestinians and displace, people in neighboring countries. And so we're expected to support this. So I think this is a moment for Americans to really stand up and be like, this makes absolutely no sense. Why are we in? Israel is not an ally, and Israel is the bad actor here. And we should, if anything, we should pressure them not to join a war for them against, this other country.
Right. And as you just mentioned the double standards. And if you look at the reporting, the West's reaction to the bombing of an Israeli hospital compared to the reaction to the bombings of Iranian hospitals that have been fatal, and never mind the decimation of Gaza hospitals, it's just, it's kind of beyond parity.
Yeah. And it's like, Israel began this war last Thursday by targeting residential areas in Tehran. I mean, they claim that there's military officials, political officials. I mean, that's not even justified. Putting that aside, it's a unprovoked attack.
Right.
Immediately, there were big images, videos coming out of Iran of kids killed, babies under the rubble, just like Gaza. Within a couple of days, Iranian hospitals were struck. Iranian, media stations, national media, even police stations. I mean, it really betrays that their aim is all over the place. They don't have a coherent strategic aim. They're just trying to drag the US into this war to fight it for them and take out a rival of them. But they're kind of all over the place. They're trying to stoke unrest. They're trying to stoke instability. They're trying to stoke chaos. I don't think, they're in for a big quagmire ultimately, and we're potentially in for a big quagmire as well. But yeah, the hypocrisy is just astounding and very blatant.
Yeah. So speaking of the nuclear program, there's been a lot of confusion over the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency's report, because of the way that Israel and many in the Western media, legacy media, have been reporting on it. Can you tell us what the IAEA report found regarding Iran's nuclear weapons program?
Yeah,
And
it
what they
really is
find?
preposterous how they're trying to manipulate this. And I think the IAEA and its chief, Rafael Grossi, deserves a lot of blame too, because they were used and they have been used to advance a war agenda, which they probably didn't want, but they allowed themselves to be used in that way. So this report that came out was a report that came with a political timing. It was nothing urgent about Iran is about to dash to the bomb. It was about part of these efforts to pressure Iran economically and at the UN over these negotiations to get a deal. This report, like the most damning thing about this report was that, and the IAEA itself acknowledges this, that Iran had undeclared nuclear sites before 2003, and that it moved some of the material from those sites. None of the material, and the IAEA report explicitly says this, it has no bearing on Iran's current nuclear program. It's not indicative of any kind of structured nuclear weapons program, any dash to the bomb. It was just a report to censure Iran, to lay the groundwork for going to the UN and trying to get UN sanctions on Iran in like October. And even the IAEA and them, I mean, the Europeans who supported it, their whole framing and, talking to some of these people and these diplomats, like the whole idea of it was to kind of build diplomatic pressure on Iran. But meanwhile, now we're seeing a week later, this report that was not at all indicative of any kind of alarming, like Iranians are going to build a weapon. They're not building a weapon. Our own intelligence community has said they're not building a weapon. They have an advanced nuclear program, which became advanced because we left the nuclear deal and we put them in a defensive spiral. So yeah, I think it's really atrocious how this report is being manipulated. Is the onus of our journalist class, of our analyst class, to tell the American public the truth about what's going on here, to hold to account these institutions that are trying to get us into a very self-defeating, self-destructive war that's not going to benefit anybody but a very small clique of our own elites and elites in Israel and their own narrow interests.
And speaking of the IAEA, here is a video of the Director General of the IAEA, Rafael Mariano Grossi, and it's from June 11th. Let's take a look at what he had to say.
Informed, and what we reported was that we did not have, as in coincidence with some of the sources you mentioned there, that we did not have any proof of a systematic effort to move into a nuclear weapon.
I think it was an important consideration. I understand what you're saying, but the fact that they continue to cite this report.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, even Rafael Grossi, like, I am increasingly just not a fan. And, even like Mohammed El-Baradei, the former chief of the IAEA, has been critical. I mean, he's right. I mean, there's no systematic effort, but even the word systematic is what kind of rubs me the wrong way. He's still trying to seemingly allude that, there's there's no evidence of Iran building a nuclear weapon, enriching uranium to weaponization levels, building a warhead, none of this stuff. There's no evidence of diversion of nuclear material from its nuclear sites. So there is absolutely zero evidence, systematic or not, of reflecting of a systematic effort for a bomb or a non-systematic one. Now, I'm sure the material has been diverted. I mean, the Iranians would be dumb if they're not trying to maybe enrich to 90%, whatever they're doing. I mean, they're under they are actually in an existential war, I would argue. But yeah, it just goes to show that, a lot of these institutions that are supposed to be impartial and kind of keepers of the global order, they are ultimately reflective of the power dynamics in the global order and the influence of America and Israel and its European allies, and the IAEA has been susceptible to that. With that said, I mean, even Rafael Grossi, even the current structure at the IAEA, they've been very much trying to get a deal, very much trying to be, like he's been. I don't think he's like a warmonger, Rafael Grossi. He's not trying to but he's been caught up in this, I think that report was just such a bad idea.
Right. So You have family in Iran. Can you tell us what people there are saying, the people that you know, and perhaps how what they're experiencing and reporting back compares to what we're hearing from Western media?
Yeah, so I was born in Iran, in Tehran, actually. I was 5 years old when we immigrated to America. But, I have many, uncles, aunts, grandparents who are in Iran. They're all, I mean, we've lost contact with them now because the internet is severely limited and basically shut down at times. I think this is partly the Iranian government limiting internet connections for like internal security reasons, partly cyber attacks that are going on. But yeah, I mean, my family is devastating. Like my grandmother, for example, is over 90 years old. She has, we had a caretaker for her. And so her caretaker is this young, like woman in her 20s, and she's like a secular woman. She's not, like she doesn't wear hijab or whatnot. And my dad was talking to her the other day, and my dad was asking the caretaker, like, are you going to leave? Because at that point, with like Trump is threatening people to evacuate Tehran. And the caretaker said that I'm not going to, I'll be here until my last breath, taking care of your mom. And, or like my cousin, like his dad is very ill, for example. And he actually his dad had a surgery planned for this week. And then he's like, what are we going to do? My dad, he can't even leave the house really. They were going to go take him to surgery. They live near that Tajri Square, which is a very vibrant and this famous bazaar in North Tehran that is very beautiful place. And Israel bombed that location a couple blocks from where they live. So yeah, this is an indiscriminate war. This is a war of, a war aimed at the destruction of Iran as a nation state, I would argue. It has nothing to do with the Islamic Republic or this kind of theocratic government that has many shortcomings. And, a lot of people in Iran are very discontent. They don't like this government. They wanted fundamental change. But now we're seeing a big rally around the flag effect, a big rally around not the regime, a rally around the country, Iran, which Iranians distinguish between their government and Iran as a entity that has been around for thousands of years, and this kind of their territorial integrity and defending their country. And everything I see is a pervasive, unprecedented outpouring of national solidarity in a country that was very polarized, like much like America and so many countries now. Iran had become a very polarized society along various divides, political, religious. So now, I mean, I think that's another thing that they didn't calculate. Netanyahu and Trump, it's a big mistake. They misread Iranian politics, Iranian public sentiment. And now what they're doing is they're facing a united country of 90 million people in a country that's very large, mountainous, very defensive. Like, it's surrounded by the Zagros and Alborz mountain ranges. The Iranian plateau has been a secure location for millennia. So this will be a war that is going to, if America actually enters it, it'll be like a Vietnam, honestly. I think it's going to be a disaster for Trump, which is why he's probably, it seemed like he was going to join the other day, but now he seems a little bit more hesitant. We'll see what happens. I'm not holding my breath. I mean, I don't underestimate Trump's stupidity and just, his ability, him getting manipulated by the Israelis. But if he does it, I think it's going to doom his political life, and it's going to be very bad for America as a global power. This is going to benefit China, Russia. I mean, if we just get sucked in spending another $10 trillion in the Middle East, it's insane.
So what is motivating Trump here? What explains his, I think Hegseth called it his strategic unpredictability? Who is he listening to, if not, for instance, Tulsi Gabbard?
So, there's this madman doctrine in international relations, which is like, if leaders act so unpredictable and crazy, it actually might benefit the country, like Mao Zedong or Nixon even had a kind of madman doctrine. But at the end of the day, the idea is that they're rational actors, but that strategically they portray themselves as mad and unpredictable. They might do anything. Trump, he might actually be mad, but he's also could be, the thing is, he ran obviously as he said he was anti-war. He criticized, his whole political career was kind of started by being, I remember in 2016, his strong criticisms of the Iraq war, how stupid that was, strong criticisms of Middle East wars. And yet he surrounded himself with a lot of the traditional neo-hawk warmongers. But it seemed like he had in his mind this idea of like being a tough negotiator. And so you're going to have a John Bolton and a Mike Pompeo. You're going to scare the other side. But at the end of the day, you don't want war. You want a deal. And that kind of, in his first term, I mean, Bolton and Pompeo, for example, sabotaged efforts to get a deal with Iran. They sabotaged efforts with North Korea and stuff. But with that said, Trump almost went to war in his first term against Iran after they killed Soleimani, after Iran shot down a US drone in 2019. But then he pulled back at the last minute. This time around, he also ran, ran as kind of an anti-war candidate. He said, I'm going to end these wars. We're not going to have any wars. I'm going to be a president of peace. God save me because we're going to have peace. And then he started seeking a deal with Iran. He even when he reimposed some sanctions on Iran in February in a memorandum, he said that I don't want to do this. I want to get a deal. A lot of people want me to do this, but the Iranians, let's make a deal. And there was kind of lax and, somewhat lax enforcement over the past couple of months. He also wrote a letter to Iran Supreme Leader Khamenei, where he apparently the letter was very respectful. It initiated this diplomatic process, 5 rounds of negotiations. Other things are that, like in January, I remember Trump retweeted a Tucker Carlson interview with Jeffrey Sachs, where Jeffrey Sachs was trying to say that Netanyahu is trying to take America into a war with Iran, drag America. So Trump on some level is seemingly cognizant of these factors. And so what happened last week was that I think, the US and Iran may have very well been on the cusp of a initial framework deal, like not a final deal, but they were on the cusp of getting to an agreement on principles. There was supposed to be a round of negotiations last Sunday in Oman with Steve Witkoff and the Iranian foreign minister. And so the Israelis, I think their worst case scenario is to have America come to some level of terms with Iran, kind of diminish its regional presence somewhat, get to a more balanced foreign policy in the Middle East, pivot to Asia, whatever. Israel is this expansionist, hegemonic power that really relies entirely on American support. It needs America it wants to get America bogged down in the Middle East. So it's always giving it unconditional support, everything supporting its expansionist, destabilizing agenda. So I think Netanyahu and them, it seems, there's 2 schools of thought. One school of thought is that Trump was basically playing 4D chess and the whole negotiations were a big ruse, and they prepared this whole strike, and he had green-lighted it maybe a month back, and this was all just a ruse. Another school of thought, which I am more convinced was what's happening, is that, no, they're not that smart, they're not that strategic. This is, they had done some preparations, potentially as diplomatic leverage, whatever, to intimidate Iran. But then it seems like Netanyahu can potentially, he's been pressuring Trump a shit ton to abandon these negotiations, to go to war, strike. And, many of Netanyahu's acolytes in the administration have also been doing this. Mike Waltz was doing it. Trump seemingly fired him for that reason, but even Rubio is a neocon. So many people around, Hegseth. But then Trump, the school of thought that he actually, Netanyahu came to him probably with hey, you gave him 60 days, it's 61 days. That 60-day thing is bullshit too. It's unclear when exactly the 60 days was given, when that timeline started, when it ends. Regardless, they had another meeting scheduled that all sides were wanting to go to. But it seems like Netanyahu, this narrative that Trump loves, a narrative that he can sell that shows him as strong and tough. And so Netanyahu's yeah, we're going to go take out all their top generals. We're going to bomb, all these sites. It's going to go great. It's going to help you get a deal. So you saw initially Trump was, that Thursday morning when they took out Iran's top military leadership, Trump was okay, this might actually go well. Israel's got this. And then he came out and he's this is excellent. I support it. The Iranians should have made a deal. They should come make a deal now. He still talks about wanting a deal, but obviously when you bomb a country, the idea that you're going to get a deal is going to be infinitely harder, if not impossible. And now we've seen when the Iranians kind of quickly reconstituted themselves, and it has become clear since last Thursday that this is going to be a major quagmire. And so now Trump is left in this position as someone who has had these kind of instincts to not get involved in the Middle East, who on the other hand has Netanyahu and all these neocons and the warmongering kind of establishment media and national security state elements of it in America all pushing for this, that he is now torn in indecision. People expected a decision yesterday, the other day. It seems like, there's some element of decision paralysis within the administration. With that said, he might very well decide to enter this war because it's not going well for them. It's not going well for the Israelis. If Trump doesn't enter it, it's going to go bad for them. If he enters it, it's going to go bad for them. It's really no good decision. At the end of the day, this is Netanyahu's fault. I think America should fundamentally reassess its relations with Israel, that this is not a strategic partner, this is not an ally. And it really makes no sense, even if you view things in kind of a realist, very cold international, like an IR way, where, you know, you could argue America, if it's trying to keep a dominant global position, yeah, China is a peer competitor. Russia could be a challenging factor. So they want to bleed Russia and Ukraine. They want to bleed, you know, they want to balance China in the Pacific Sea, not let it take Taiwan. Okay, you know, in some realm of this kind of IR wonky realist school. But Iran is a mid-tier, debilitated state. It's not a great power. It never put, you know, the beneficial thing for America was to come to some kind of strategic terms to Iran, with Iran, peel it away from Russia and China, have a more balanced foreign policy in the Middle East where it deals with the Iranians, it deals with Israel, it deals with the Saudis, it maximizes its leverage, it doesn't get pulled into underwriting any one side. Just like the Chinese do, just like the Russians do, they give themselves diplomatic flexibility, they deal with all these countries. But Trump is now getting dragged into this strategic quagmire, which is America's actual adversaries, which I'm against escalation with Russia and China as well. But even for these kind of foreign policy blob people who are obsessing about, we got to preserve American like hegemony in the world, whatever, go after these countries. This war in Iran is going to be very counterproductive against them. Right. Iran is they're going to get stuck in a quagmire that's going to entirely benefit China and Russia. And I'm sure they're going to actually do their utmost to bleed America and Iran. And there's already suggestions that, for example, the Chinese are doing that.
So we're going to return to some questions that I have for you about what's happening in Iran, the Iranian leadership, what the impact of all of this is on their nuclear development. But before we go there, I just want to show a clip of Tucker Carlson, whom you mentioned, on Steve Bannon's show. And here they are talking about why Trump is ignoring Tulsi Gabbard's intelligence assessment, saying that Iran was not close to having nuclear weapons. So let's take a look.
Why was Tulsi Gabbard not invited to the Why was Tulsi Gabbard not invited to the Camp David meeting all day?
You know why.
Why Tulsi Gabbard still to the American public has said the last public statement is that the program was not back up and running. And now we have from Bibi by himself on Fox by Brent Baer that the thing was 12 to 13 months away. It wasn't this weekend.
I know.
And this is by his own thing. And we also know that it was a decapitation, as we said on Friday. It wasn't just about the nuclear program. It's a decapitation of total leadership. So this is a total regime change, which, by the way, you may have a plan for regime change, is fine, but you got to bring the American people along. Let me go back.
By the way, I said that publicly last week. This is the point of this is regime change. I know everyone involved. I know I'm telling the truth. I have no weird motive here at all. I don't hate Israel. I'm not.
Plus, you know the players, and you went to, and you know the Iraq situation.
This isn't a regime change effort, and why not just say that? But you're a Holocaust denier for saying that. Well, stop. Let's have a rational conversation about what our aims are here, and maybe you can convince me that we need to support a regime change war in Iran. Tell me how that plays out in a country of 90 million people. Have you thought it through? Do you even care? And the answer is no. We have a economic and political and demographic crisis in Europe because of U.S.-backed, Israel-backed
Syria
wars in the Middle East.
Yeah.
That's what's destroyed Europe, where my ancestors came from. And I spend a lot of time there, and I love European culture, which is Christian culture. And it's destroyed that. And shut up, you're not allowed to care. Who's making the rules here?
So it's interesting that you have Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon, people who I personally don't really see eye to eye with on many issues, but on this, they're like just calling out reality.
Yeah, I mean, it just the way I like, the way Tucker Carlson talks that I like, it's very common sense. Like, this is just common sense. I mean, the stuff he brought up with Ted Cruz right now, this clip he just played. I mean, same here. Like, I'm a lefty. I've never been a fan of these guys, but on this issue, they're 100% correct, and if we have any, there's no way, if anyone has a coherent ideology of America first, that we should be prioritizing the welfare and security and prosperity of Americans as the American state and the American government that we vote for. This is not it. So at least these people are consistent. They're morally consistent, on many things I might not agree with, but on this, they're 100% right. And I think, when it comes to, healing America. Okay, so America, just like I said earlier, we've become very polarized. We've had all these divisions that have hurt our country. This is an opportunity for a new politics to get past the kind of traditional divides in this country and build bridges between people on the left and the right who have, on this issue, a very strong, I mean, this is a key issue. It's just not about Iran. I mean, this issue of America's foreign policy posture in the world, this quest for global hegemony, global empire, that I think, as they rightly said, it is really, it's unsustainable. No empire in history has been sustainable. They always succumb to imperial overstretch, which is exactly what we're seeing happen right now, where if Russia makes a move for the Baltic states, it's either America has to go to World War III or the whole NATO alliance is going to collapse. If China makes a move for Taiwan, it's either we go to World War III or America's alliance system in the Pacific. If right now with Israel, I mean, it's way dumber because, again, there in America, it's to its strategic benefit to come to terms with Iran. But now we're going to like a major war for Israel, which is actually a strategic liability. So this quest for global hegemony and dominance and empire is really the key issue of our era in the 21st century right now. That America, we were, after World War II, we emerged as the victor. Half of global GDP was in America. We helped build a global order that was imperfect and in many ways flawed in many ways. It caused a lot of human suffering in many ways. I don't want to, make light of that, but the American global, dominance also had a lot of benefits, I would argue, for the world. There's certain, at least we profess good things. We try to, which I think there is value in that. I'm a very strong critic of America's, a lot of America's foreign policy, but now it's totally unsustainable. We're transitioning to a multipolar global order. We need to acknowledge the legitimate interests of some of these other countries, not try to go dominate everyone, intervene everyone, get Ukraine to join NATO, get Taiwan to go to, sacrifice itself for preserving American hegemony. And so we need to transition to a more, the kind of global equilibrium, a global balance that is much more safe for everyone. This is a time for like Bismarckian diplomacy. We need statesmen. We need visionary diplomats, not a lot of these idiots we have right now. So it's very dangerous. And I think Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon, it seems to me that they get a lot of this actually. Yeah. And so this is important.
Yeah. Speaking of the regime change, this is from a couple of days ago, but I think it's relevant to play. Here's Netanyahu making that case very clearly.
And now top military commanders, senior nuclear scientists, the Islamic regime's most significant enrichment facility, and a large portion of its ballistic missile arsenal. More is on the way. The regime doesn't know what hit them. They don't know what will hit them. The nation of Iran and the nation of Israel have been true friends since the days of Cyrus the Great. And the time has come for you to unite around your flag and your historic legacy by standing up for your freedom from an evil and oppressive regime. It has never been weaker. This is your opportunity to stand up and let your voices be heard. Woman, life, freedom. Zan, Zandegi, Azadi. As I said yesterday and many times before, Israel's fight is not with you. It's not with you, the brave people of Iran, whom we respect and admire. Our fight is with our common enemy, a murderous regime that both oppresses you and impoverishes you. Brave people of Iran, your light will defeat the darkness. I'm with you. The people of Israel are with you.
Okay, so I know it's laughable. I heard you laughing. It's like we're watching a stand-up routine. But what are your thoughts on this set? From
God, where to start? I mean, you're hurting me by showing me this.
Sorry, I should have given a trigger warning.
Yeah, that really deserved a trigger alert. Yeah. So where to start? I mean, it's just funny with the Cyrus the Great stuff because Netanyahu conveniently, when it suits him, he cites different biblical stories when it comes to Iran. So one is his biblical story of Cyrus the Great liberating Jews in Babylon 2,500 years ago, this ancient Persian king. And now another biblical story I've heard in Israel, he does this a lot more when it comes to demonize Iran. He's like, these are the, it's a story of Esther. So he's like, these Iranians, they try to destroy. It's the same Iranian empire, mind you. It's an Achaemenid empire. It's the same Iranian entity of Cyrus the Great. Domestically in Israel, he's like, these are the same people who wanted to kill us since the time of the Achaemenid Empire. This is the story of Esther, which they were trying to plot a genocide against the Jews. And actually, from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that story kind of ended in a reverse genocide where hundreds of thousands of Amaleks were killed. And so they call Iranians Amalek. I mean, Netanyahu has explicitly said, these are Amaleks. These are and they also use that language. So it's like, it's this religious fanaticism. It's also reflective of a religious fanaticism. Israel, I think increasingly is like ISIS with nukes. It's like it's ISIS with nukes with the backing of the entire West. So they're religious fanatics. They engage in genocidal slaughter. They're destroying, they're trying to destabilize the region. I don't see much different. I don't think there's that much moral difference between, what they're doing. And so Netanyahu right now, this women life, he's liberating Iranian women. I think it was Max Blumenthal that had a tweet that said that they're liberating Iranian women from their lives.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Like one murder at a time. I mean, this is the same thing with the LGBTQ people in Gaza. It's like you care so much about them. You want to free them by killing them.
Yeah. And, these are societies that have their own culture wars. They have to develop organically. Right. Yes, I don't like the theocratic rules in Iran, the regulations in Iran, the mandatory hijab that has largely now become, they're not enforcing it for the past couple of years as much. And so right now, you see how it's backfiring for him. It's like there's many videos right now, Iranian women without a hijab in Tehran who are like, fuck you, Netanyahu, fuck you, Israel. Yeah. Like, we're fighting for our country. I just saw a video of all these people on motorcycles driving through Tehran with their flags. And usually that's like the Basij people who do that, like the hardline kind of, religious kind of people who support the system. But it was interesting. I was watching this video. I'll tweet it later today. There's so many women without the hijab, with all next to these Basiji dudes holding the Iranian flag on the motorcycle. So this is resulting in a very interesting, again, when it came to the polarization in Iran, that this is resulting in something very interesting happening in Iranian society. It's a rally around the country. It's seemingly healing some of these divisions that have existed. But regardless, that is a country that has to undergo its own organic, social, political, cultural growth, just like any other country. For this guy to come and women, life, freedom, whatever. Yeah, the women, life, freedom movement was an amazing movement. It was a necessary movement. It resulted in, some hard-fought gains for women in that country. But, this guy's obviously trying to exploit that, co-opt it to destroy Iran. Netanyahu, at the same time as he says this, he supports the Iranian monarchists, which are explicitly fascist, explicitly intolerant of any kind of free speech, any kind of debate, any kind of dissent. They go after all these Iranian opposition people, everyone. At the same time as he supports these Iranian monarchists, who the Iranian monarchists don't like the ethnic minorities in Iran, and even the Pahlavi regimes. He also supports the ethnic separatists in Iran. And, certain elements of, Kurds, Baluchis. I mean, they're all supporting Iran right now, but there are separatist elements. So this just betrays an aim to just collapse the country and have Iranians at each other's throats. So he'll say this, he'll say that. At the end of the day, Netanyahu's war is not with the Islamic Republic. It's not with Hamas, I would argue. It's with this vision of this, this ISIS with nuclear weapons, this Israel that is this expansionist, apartheid, genocidal state that, what happens if Iran collapses and descends into chaos, like Syria, like Yemen, like Libya, like Iraq, like Afghanistan, like Lebanon, that what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next is they're going to take out the West Bank. They're going to take all those Palestinians into Jordan. Jordan's going to collapse. Egypt at that hand, this corrupt Egyptian dictatorship is just going to be left with what they'll probably go back into the Sinai. This is this idea. This is this expansionist view of Zionism. Zionism is not a monolithic ideology. I think there was room for all these people to live side by side and with equal rights, with peace, side by side. And the Jewish people, I think, have deserved, safety and security, obviously, in that land as well. I would argue.
They lived there in safety before they tried to impose a demographic majority.
Yeah. But even in this framework of this Israeli-Palestinian conflict, there was, a two-state solution, which the Israelis negated by moving 600,000 religious zealots in the West Bank since Oslo. I mean, it's a joke, and we're still talking about it. But regardless, this current strand of Zionism seems very expansionist, destructive, and it has nothing to do with the Islamic Republic. The Islamic Republic is going to go tomorrow, if it goes tomorrow. All these people who are going to say, oh, you know, the Islamic Republic was the root of all the region's ills. We'll see what happens then. We'll see once Jordan falls apart, once, you know, they're moving for the West Bank, once then Egypt is going to, you know, balance of threat. Turkey is now the new big scapegoat in Syria. Syria, they're bombing. There is no Hamas, Hezbollah, or Iran in Syria now. No Islamic Republic. They're bombing the shit out of Syria. They're taking its territory. They don't want sanctions removed. This is a country, it's like a colonial, it's a colony of the US and Europe that is trying to dominate the strategically important region with hydrocarbons and energy resources in a very kind of, you know, old school imperialistic, violent, colonial way.
You know, it's so interesting because all the discourse from Western politicians and Western media is that Iran is this irrational actor and we can't trust them with nuclear weapons because who knows what they're going to do. But I mean, Iran seems about 17,000 times more rational than the US government.
Yeah, no, I mean, even the Islamic Republic, for all my opposition to them, they're very rational leaders for their own interests, for their own. I mean, even if Iran got nuclear weapons, they're not going to go nuke Israel. They want it for their own defense. You know, it's ridiculous. Even U.S. officials, intelligence community assessments, Joint Chiefs of, you know, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I remember Martin Dempsey, the former Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staffs under Obama. He made a point to consistently at that time to say, like, yeah, Iran's a rational actor. They're not, you know, Netanyahu is the one not a rational actor. You know, not for, you know, he seems. It's interesting. I was reading about the psychological definition of evil, you know, which is like this dark triad personality traits. It's like human beings who lack empathy, who have Machiavellian, this ends justify the means approach, and they're narcissistic. So it's like people who have these three traits, they're like in the self spiral. It's very hard to pull them out of it. They're incredibly destructive. And so Netanyahu, he seems to have all the hallmarks of the dark triad. He's an evil person. And I think it has to do with his own interests at the end of the day. It's not even Israel's interests. It's his own, you know, maintaining power, not falling out and, you know, go to the courts, going to jail on corruption charges. And it's just this war with Iran trying to sabotage what Trump was doing is a Hail Mary. I read it as desperation. I think he's more desperate than ever. But that also makes me worried because, again, ISIS with nukes. But they might use a nuke.
ISIS with nukes that pretends to be the only democracy in the Middle East, pretends not to be a theocracy. At least ISIS is honest about what it is. I mean, they're evil, but they're honest about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a joke. It's a joke. I mean, even for the, you know, there's so much discrimination against and institutionalized discrimination against, you know, Israeli-Palestinian, you know, Palestinians within Israel in the 1948 borders. And it's funny because this just made me think of the Zohran debates in New York City, where he calls for Israel state with equal rights. Okay. And people in New York City are giving him shit. Like, why is that controversial? Even so, you're acknowledging then that Israel is not a democracy.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's one thing I wish people had said more, that even the people who give, like that guy in New York City, Zohran, who's running for mayor shit, it's like you're acknowledging then that by criticizing him for saying he wants an Israeli state, you're acknowledging it's not that. It's not equal rights. It is an apartheid ethno-supremacist state that is expansionist, that is apartheid. So, yeah.
Yeah, they're basically saying you're an anti-Semite because you want Israel to not be an a theocratic ethno state, which really isn't a good thing for the Jews, by the way. I mean, I make this point a lot, but if that's anti-Semitism, you're suggesting that all Jews support an ethno state, apartheid ethno state. So,
and it's interesting, actually, just on that point, I think one other thing that bears saying is the similarities between the Islamic Republic and Israel. There's actually some similarities that are very interesting because they're both 20th century ideologies that are exploiting these religions, these ancient religions, for modern political ends. So the Islamic Republic is actually a very heterodox interpretation of Shia Islam. Shia Islam has historically been very non-political, quietist, they call it. So, you know, even Khomeini had to do a lot to get the seminaries and get people to get on board with his vision, which is more about a radical political vision than a religious one. And he created this kind of heterodox idea of this clerical leadership, which the seminaries were actually against. And even in Iraq, for example, the Ayatollah Sistani, the other Shia powers are against. Similarly, Zionism is trying to take this ancient religion and formulate this political ideology for the 21st century. And they're both using and abusing these traditional religions. I think the Islamic Republic has been responsible for a lot of Islamophobia by doing everything in the name of Islam when it's really this political entity that is heterodox with the traditional way the religion has been practiced in Iran, and has pushed a lot of Iranians away from religion. And I think similarly, Israel, it's very heterodox with traditional Judaism, I would argue, you know better than me, and very, I think also just like they foster Islamophobia, they foster anti-Semitism through their actions. So both of these regimes are not good regimes at the end of the day for the religions that they claim to represent.
Right. One has a lot more blood on its hands than the other, but I see your point. Yes. So I know that you have to leave, and you've been so generous with your time. Any final thoughts you want to share? If not, we can just have you on.
No, I think, I think we just need, maximum public outcry, organization like the Iraq War. There's massive protests, there was massive movements in 2003. It didn't work ultimately, but it created a political cost. Obama emerged from that. To this day, many of us were radicalized from that era, and we entered anti-war politics. So right now is a time for organization, is a time for rallies, is a time for calling your members of Congress, Democrat or Republican, telling them we don't want this war. Please call your members of Congress. That is effective. It's, this is a constitutional crisis. Trump does not have constitutional authority to wage a war. That this, our Constitution gives authority to Congress to wage war. They don't have an authorization for military action against Iran. So if he does attack Iran, it's going to be illegal under American law, under the Constitution. So we need to make that clear. We need to call our members of Congress, and we need to do our utmost to prevent this from happening.
Well, thank you so much, Sina Toossi. And I hope your family is okay. And everyone in Iran is in my thoughts. And when I say that, I don't mean therefore we should bomb them. I mean, we should not bomb them and let them live. And that's, if you want people to have freedom, you got to let them live. Thank you so much. I'm going to stay on and read the super chats, and we will see you another time. Thank you so much.
Goodbye. Bye, everyone.
So that was a great chat. So excited that we were able to talk to Sina. We brought this to you because we know things are moving so quickly. So we wanted to make sure we had some live coverage. But we will. You are so lucky, guys. You're so lucky, because we will be releasing another interview that we pre-tape. We're doing that later today. So you have so much stuff from us. You have a live stream that we just did today that you can obviously watch later. If you're not watching live, hi. And then we'll have another pre-taped interview. Also, please do support the show at usefulidiotspodcast.com. You get bonus content. You get Thursday Throwdown, which is a really great, fun part of the show where we react to media clips from during the week. It's kind of like a Monday morning, but it's not live, and it's from shows besides the Sunday morning news shows. Let's see. Oh, also, I'm going to be doing a live stream tonight, a special Katie Halper Show live stream at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Mohammed Merendi, Dr. Mohammed Merendi, who is going to join live from Iran. Very brave professor, academic, who has been absolutely killing, just doing amazing smackdowns on Western media. And it looks like he's being targeted because he's a very brave critic of U.S. hegemony and imperialism. Let me just read this. Okay, so Iranian Kiddo writes, why is IAEA still in Iran? Get them out. They are spies. Trump was acting the whole time. Did you read the report? Attack was in the making since February. Preemptive war doctrine should be outlawed. The attack on Iran has been in the pipeline for at least 40 years. The 25 F-151s that I helped build avionics in the 90s were specifically given to Israel for that attack. F-151 is nuclear capable. Okay. And I think that's basically it. We are very happy that you tuned in. And we will see you when we release our episode tomorrow. And we will see you next week for Monday morning. And if you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do. Just hit subscribe and then the bell. Also, please like the stream. That always helps. And share the links. Okay. Thanks a lot. Bye, everyone.